I'm not gonna pretend like I have some secret. I don't have some secret. It's just purely sitting there and doing it. It does come easier. I don't panic as much as I used to. I used to be like, this book, I can't, it's not going to go. Like, it's a mess. It's a mess on the page. It's a mess in my head. I'm not sure how I'm going to fix it. Now, the good news is I always fix it. I always think I'm not going to be able to, but I haven't yet written a book that I didn't.
Welcome to Raising Baby Authors. I'm Cassia, your host, and a brand new writer. If you feel overwhelmed and lost about this whole writing thing, you're certainly not alone. Join me while I pester my author guests for writing advice and find out how they do it. Because if they could, then why not you? It truly takes a village to raise an author, so let me share my village with you. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the classroom. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. And let's meet today's mentor. It's a historical romance author, Anna Bradley. Anna Bradley has been writing Regency and Georgian historical romance with heat, heart, and happily ever afters since her first book, A Wicked Way to Win an Earl, was published in fall 2015. Anna is originally from New England, but has made her home in Oregon since 2005, where she lives with her husband and 2 kids, an overgrown English garden, and a menagerie of wayward pets. If she isn't writing, she's probably hiding in a corner reading, chasing the dog, or herding the cats, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Anna's latest book, The Duke's Christmas Bride, will release this September. It's exciting. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that you're here. I'm sure my listeners will be so happy to hear what you got to say.
Thank you. Gosh, that's great.
In fact, I do have 2 questions for you from my listeners. I think it's actually a perfect question to introduce you.
Okay.
So my friend with the handle Pamela Reads asked, where should readers start if they haven't read your books before? What would be a good place to start?
I mean, you can always start at the beginning with A Wicked Way to Win an Earl. That book has there are four full-length novels in that series, and then a novella to finish it up. So that might be a good place to start. Or if you're into like romantic suspense, maybe with The Swooning Virgins, which is The Virgin Who Ruined Lord Grey, is the first book.
Yes. I can definitely recommend that one. That was my first book of yours. I enjoyed it so much.
That was a fun one to write too. Yeah.
I mean, I listened to it, an audio, and like the performance was amazing, and it was so immersive. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Oh, so good.
Okay, so if you want to start, that would be a good place. So then A Wicked Way to Win an Earl is like not a suspense. It's more of a classical
That's
Regency.
more of a traditional historical romance, and that series is as well. The final novella in that series is a Christmas story. So yeah, that's a good one to start. You know, I have a fondness for the first book, of course. You know, I think every author does. But you know, there's not really a series that I wasn't happy with. So I mean, whichever like blurb appeals to you is always a good place to start too, you know?
Yeah, whichever you find. I think I found The Virgin Who Ruined Lord Grey from a review by Alexis Hall.
Yes, I read that review. That was very kind of him to review that book. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
I was checking you because because I was going to Rare Paris, and I vowed to read all the historical authors there. Because there wasn't many.
So good. Yeah.
There wasn't many. And I was like, I really love historicals. I'm going to discover all those authors. And then I checked your books, and then I see like a very lengthy review from my favorite author. I'm like, okay, let's see.
I love his books too. The Spire series is one of my favorite all time.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a great series. And I love all of his books. But again, the first book you read, the first book you write, the first book you read of a certain series that you love really sticks with you, I think. And so that Spire's series really stuck with me. Glitterland, I think, is the first one.
Yes.
Love that.
The first one. So you read it when it first came out?
No, actually, I don't. I didn't. I think it was a couple years after it came out. It's like you stumble on people. And I just started reading romance. And so I came of course, when you start reading romance, Alexis Hall's name comes up quickly. So I was like, oh, this
Yes.
looks really great. So I'll read it. And I'm just like, oh, I love it. I just think he's very talented and his books are
Yeah,
really interesting.
that's
So,
true. Okay. And I have another question.
okay.
Well, we're going to talk about the genre more, but my friend Victoria wanted to know. She asked me to tell you that she put an emoji at the end of the question because she was worried it would sound mean or something.
No, don't worry. It's fine.
So let me see. Was it intimidating or challenging for you to write about a time period so far removed from our own?
I think it is challenging. I don't think that's a mean question at all. That's a really good question. It is challenging, but I have a background in that era. Like, I've actually read and studied it pretty extensively in that era. So it's almost like a second home to me. So had like a leg up on that. But yeah, it is difficult. It's easy to make mistakes. Readers are smart. If you make a little error, they definitely will catch it. And I think that's a good thing. We should be called on our errors. So yes and no. I've had other writers or other people who want to write, maybe I should say they're intimidated by that world, but I'm more intimidated by like having to create a world. So it's, create a world from scratch. Like, I don't know how writers do that. I guess, it's all kind of where your interest lies. I'm really interested in that era. So it's less challenging for that reason, but I still make mistakes. And so that's challenging. Yeah. So yes and no, I guess.
For me, like as much as I love to read it, I think I'll never be able to write one just because I don't have any knowledge in that area. I
I know what
practically
you
learn
mean.
it. I learn it
You
from
could
your
learn it.
books, you know?
Yeah, I mean, don't say that because if I make a mistake, then you'll. But you know
Well,
what? I was thinking about writing a Western historical because I feel like people really love them. But you know what? The more I thought about it, the more I was like, I really just don't know anything about that period in American history. And it's like, yeah, I can see what you mean. It's intimidating. Like,
yeah,
don't know where to start.
the amount of
Mm-hmm.
research. And for me,
Yep.
as someone who like English is not my first language, so
Right.
even writing contemporaries, I'm looking sometimes at a word and like, did I use that right? Like very often. And I think with historicals, I'll just get paralyzed just because every word I'm going to question. I don't know if I should
I
use that
know
or
what you mean.
not.
No. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Though after you've written, like once you get a couple of books under your belt, like you do develop more confidence. And so don't never say never. Like you might, since you love reading it so much, you probably know more than you think you do about it because you just absorb so much from reading. So hopefully, since you love it, I would love to see you write one because the people who love it are the people who should be writing it, right? So
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I think, yeah, after I hopefully get a couple of books out myself, I'll take up upon like a challenge project and try to
There
write a
you go.
historical.
You
That'd be
can always get a
nice.
reader too. Somebody would read it for you. I'd read it over for you if you wanted me to, and to look for like just to make sure, you've got the history right and stuff. Yeah. People will do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for answering questions of our
Sure.
listeners. Usually, the first logical question is your background. So, you say you published your first book in 2015, but before that, like, did you always want to write?
I always wanted to write and I always wrote. I did a lot of academic writing before I did that first novel. And I did write one other book before that, though it never got published. I kind of wrote it and then didn't pursue it after I got a first rejection because I had just taken a new job. So I kind of had a little brush with writing and then backed away from it. But I've taught writing for years and years and years before I actually stopped teaching and became a full-time writer. So, and I also worked with rare books for years and years and years in a rare books library with a focus on sort of Regency, Victorian, Georgian, and even earlier novels, mostly by women. And so I've been like in that world kind of on the periphery. It ended up being like a no-brainer to really start writing because writing teacher in in a book world where I had a lot of access to Regency era novels. And so, had it easy in that way because
So,
I was
if you
immersed.
say you were teaching, so what was your education then, like in history?
I
Or
have a BA in English Lit and Philosophy. Philosophy. That's You're very employable with a philosophy degree, it turns out. And I also have a master's in English Lit. And so was teaching writing at, the college level, mostly introductory writing classes. So I was really in the writing sphere all the time, even before I actually sat down and really pursued a writing career. And then also I was in a literary sphere because I worked in a library for a while too. So so I was doing a lot of reading in the area in that era. And so I had a lot of background and I had a lot of writing experience. And I'd always wanted to do a romance. I read romances all through college and graduate school, and because they're so, they're such an escape. And so when you get stressed out, you go to romance. And so for me, it had always been a love. And so you combine a love of romance with a writing background and you get a romance writer, I guess, is how it came about.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like a dream. I never thought I could write anything. I never even considered that. I considered English, but as a translator sort of thing. And then, well, I'm glad my parents convinced me not to do that because probably I wouldn't be here right now. But
right.
yeah,
I
it's
think
not
a lot of people think they
profitable
can't
thing.
write, and it's not true. Writing's hard for sure, and it's close to your heart. So if you don't feel like you're succeeding at it, it's painful, But I feel like, if you want to write, you can make it work, Again, never say never, Most people who write, even professional writers, think they can't write. We all have imposter syndrome, So
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that for
okay.
sure. But all right. So you said the first manuscript you queried and then nothing
Period.
happened with that?
That was years and years and years ago.
Mhm.
No, I think I queried with ages ago. It was a contemporary romance and it was kind of a category length romance. So I queried with Silhouette. I don't even know if I think they were a Harlequin imprint and no, I got nowhere with that. So then all these years go by, right? I do all this other stuff. And then I was kind of stagnating in the teaching. I had gotten kind of burned out, but I couldn't really leave it because I had two really little kids and teaching is super flexible. And my husband has a really not flexible job. So one of us needed to be flexible. But I was like, oh, I'm not getting the satisfaction I want out of this job anymore. And so I think I'm going to just write a book. Like I'm just going to sit down and do it because I wanted to have that satisfaction, that sort of career satisfaction. And I wasn't getting it where I was. And so that was really what prompted me. I felt kind of like it's hard when you're teaching and you're burnt out and you have little kids and it's like you need this thing for yourself. So this book was like this first book, A Wicked Way to Win an Earl, was for myself. And I had a ball. It's so much fun writing that book. I had a great time. It took me forever. It took me like 18 months because I just didn't have that much time. Then once I had finished it, I was like, maybe I could get this published. Like I didn't really write it to publish it. I just wrote it because I wanted to write. But then after it was done, I thought maybe. And so I did. That was when I started querying, was with that book was when I started querying agents. So
Or
yeah,
all right. So and how did that go? Like how long did it take you to publish?
not very long. I was surprised actually. I queried agents. I was really careful about querying. And that's something that, people should probably, maybe writers should talk more about it because I think there's a lot of anxiety around the querying. And I'm not going to say it isn't anxiety producing because it is. It's really, really hard. But I did it really slowly. I would do like 25 agents at a time and then wait and see what came back because I wanted to make sure my query letter was working. So I thought if I query and nobody wants to look at it, maybe it's the letter, maybe, and so I waited, but I actually ended up getting a bunch of requests for it. And so I sent it off to, I think, 3 or 4 agents. And then I accepted an offer from my current agent, Marlene Stringer at Stringer Literary. And then she shopped the book around and I think it took about 6 or 7 months and then it got bought by Berkeley.
So you're with Berkeley now?
Not with Berkeley now. No, I did 2 books with Berkeley. Now I'm with Kensington. And I've also done a bunch of books for Oliver Heber Books. I don't know. They're they're smaller, more independent book publisher. It's run by a writer, Tanya Crosby. I did a bunch of books with them as well. They're kind of an up and comer. And they're great because you have more control. It's almost like self-publishing, but not, but mostly Kensington now.
Did you ever consider self-publishing?
I think in this industry you have to consider it. I think it's such a integral part of publishing now. Yes, I'm not great at stuff like algorithms, advertising, marketing, publicity. I'm not really good at that stuff. And I don't love it. Like I don't like it that much. Like I'd rather just write. And so part of me really wants to, and the other part of me is like, maybe I should just stick with writing. So I've kind of been going back and forth on it forever. I think it's a very viable way to do it. Very viable way to have a writing career is to self-publish.
Well, you've already went into the situation that you are a full-time author, so that's a dream for so many self-published and traditionally published authors. So I guess at this point, you can kind of choose whatever you want to do.
I can choose, but to be clear, like I don't know that like I'm a full-time writer, yes, but I also have a husband who has a job, and so it's I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it isn't hard to make a living just writing. It is really hard. And so, if it wasn't for my husband, it would be a lot harder for me to do this. So, just full disclosure there, like I don't want to mislead anybody about publishing.
Of course. Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the process. But first, can we do some math? So you started in 2015. No, it's just one question, but I'm
Easy
not
math?
sure if you can count
Okay, good.
if you can count them all yourself. How many books do you have out?
I've got 27 now. I think the 27th is,
27.
oh no, maybe the one that's coming out in September is 29. Hold on, let me do it quick. So 24, the one that's coming out in September is 24, but I'm currently working on another series. Oh no, wait, sorry, 27. It is 27. I forgot to. So 27. And so then I've got a 3-book series coming out. I think the first one comes out next year. So we're edging into the 30 area. By the time, I'm done. I don't know if I'll ever be done, but yeah, right around that number.
I knew I'm gonna love that question because I had a thought that after 20 you probably don't even count them anymore, and I knew you were gonna get like, how many is that?
I did. It seems crazy now. Every once in a while I'll count them up and think, wow, I can't believe. And to be fair, not all of those are full length. Some of those are novellas. So it's mix of both.
All right, let's be fair here.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so it's been 9 years and you have 20, so it's like 3 books a year, basically, kind of.
Yeah, like 2.5, which if you want to stay sane, I'm not sure I really recommend that schedule. It's hard though with romance because you really do want to keep publishing a lot because your backlist is important. If you want to run it as a business, you need the income from the backlist, meaning your already published books. So yeah, 2.5, definitely year, and a little slower now, a little bit slower in the last year. I've taken more time off.
All right. And then considering 2.5 books a year, how does your process kind of look like? I mean, by that is how long does it take you to write the first draft? How many drafts does it take? Things like that.
It takes me, let's see, I can write a draft fairly quickly. So I would say a full-length book, like a 90 to 100,000 word novel, it takes me for a first draft only about maybe a month and a half. And I'm actually not that fast of a writer. I know people who do it really, really much more quickly than that. From start to finish, I usually do at least 4 revisions. So I'd say it takes 4 months overall, 4.5 months. That's like a comfortable amount of time for me. But I've been doing it for a long time. Remember, like when I first started, I did not write that quickly. It took me a long time to get here where I could do it that quickly.
Yeah, that would be probably my next question. How much has changed since like you started, and how much easier it is now to put out a first draft, and how much cleaner it is?
First draft is definitely cleaner. It doesn't feel any easier. I keep waiting for it to get easy, and it hasn't happened yet. It's never easy. I wish I could say. I know. I wish. I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could say. Wow. I mean, I just sit down and it flows right out. That is not the case. Like it's hard. It's hard work. I think it's always hard, honestly. I mean, I think there probably are writers out there. In fact, I know 1 or 2 who really can just sit down and produce like a quality piece of writing first draft. Like I know people who don't do more than 1 draft, which my book is a mess after the first draft. Like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't really know who the
Still,
characters
after
are.
9 years.
Still, oh, absolutely. Yeah, because as much as you plan it, it takes it on its own life as soon as you start writing it. And so I might sit down with like a really coherent plan and then start writing it and being like, this isn't working and this is happening instead. And you kind of have to go with it. But like a book is like it's like dominoes, right? As soon as one thing falls over, it knocks everything else out of whack. So you can't just change one little thing. You end up changing. It changes so much from first draft to last draft, I guess is what I'm saying. And sometimes I feel like I'm just running to keep up with it. So I like the late drafting stages. I like it when I've got, once you get past the second draft, it's all fine tuning for me. And I really like doing that. Like that part is easy for me. It's fun. And just sharpening up dialogue, changing lines here or there. But that part where you're producing just sheer pages and pages of content and then trying to formulate it, like get it into like, it's like a big lump of clay and you're trying to mold it. That's hard. It's still hard. Yeah. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't have some secret. It's just purely sitting there and doing it. It does come easier. I don't panic as much as I used to. I used to be like, this book, it's not gonna go. Like I can't make this book work. Like it's a mess. It's a mess on the page. It's a mess in my head. I'm not sure how I'm gonna fix it. Now the good news is I always fix it. I always think I'm not gonna be able to, but I haven't yet written a book that I didn't. Now I don't panic as much because I'm like, well, I fixed all the other ones. So, I mean, this would be the first time I couldn't fix a book. So you just have to keep poking at it, like pulling at it and messing with it until it fits the shape that works for that story. Which,
And
yeah,
after you've written so many books, you kind of know the tricks and
you do. That's true. You do know the tricks and you do know, like, I think one of the things that really happens with me is the characters become somebody other than what I planned sometimes. And if the characters, like the actions they take have to fit their character. So if you start out with, or you have an idea of a character and then they change as you're writing it, you get to this point where you're like, this character wouldn't do that. So that plot piece is no longer working. And so now I have to fix it. Like now I have to make it into something that works for this character. And it can be, can be hard because it means rewriting the whole thing. Like that's what revision is, right? Like, well, I got to make it fit. I got to change it around so it works and it changes everything, changes the whole book.
So it still happens that you have to rewrite big chunks because something has changed in the character arc.
It happens more so with some books than others. Every once in a while you'll get one where you're like, wow, this thing just worked, but it still happens. Not to the extent it used to. I remember with my first book, I had to rearrange everything. Like chapter 16 became chapter 4. I just didn't know how to do the 3-act structure very well. That doesn't happen anymore. That kind of stuff is, I've done it enough so that I know where things should be. I know how to pace it. I don't usually have any trouble with dialogue. Dialogue's easy for me. So yeah, it's different stuff I worry about now. More fine tuning stuff. So I guess it does get easier in that way. Yeah. I don't want to discourage anybody.
Comforting to know. That is comforting. All right. So you did mention you have a plan when you start to write the first draft. So how much do you actually plan, and do you use any specific story structure or just a 3-act general kind of?
I don't have one, like I know, like, Save the Cat works for some people. There's all these different structures. I don't use a specific structure. I do pay attention to stuff. I do outline. And I pay very specific attention to stuff like turning points, midpoint, turning point, that kind of stuff. There are some things I think every story needs to have, right? And I do adhere to a structure in that sense, in the sense that 25% of the way into the book, you need a turning point. Because I think that's how stories work, I guess. Like almost any story you read or any movie you watch, you'll see all those turning points in the places they should be. It's just a structure that works. So in that way, yes, I do adhere to a structure. I put the turning points in where they traditionally go. I don't I try to prioritize character over plot. And I'd even go so far as to say that books where I didn't do that are the ones that I end up struggling with. Books where I get really caught up in the plot and how to plot it and less sort of paying attention to this is who this character is. This is what this character will do. This character won't do this thing. I guess I would say I'm a character-based plotter, right? Like I try to make everything arise out of character. There's a really good book, Chuck Wendig, who he's the Fight Club. He wrote Fight Club. He has a book about writing called Damn Fine Story. That's a great book. It's a really interesting book talks about structure of novels and the way that some of the structures you read about, like Save the Cat. Save the Cat has some great stuff in it, by the way. But it's a linear structure, and Chuck Wendig talks about like stories are like a house. They're not linear. They're sort of, three-dimensional. And so I got a lot out of reading that book. I would recommend that book to any writer. I love my craft books. I'm addicted to. I read them all. I read all kinds of craft books. So they're really helpful. There's always something new, That's what I love about writing. Always something new to learn. Stephen King on writing. Everybody should read it. It's the Bible. It's the writer's Bible. Robert McKee's Story.
So we started on the structure and plan. So you start with characters, as I understood, and then you try to think of,
Then I tried to plot. And I mean, a lot of the times I'm working with a second or third book in a series. So it's like the basic idea is already there. Like you kind of know, like you can't totally veer off from the idea you formed with the first book. Like right now I'm working on the second book of a new series. And so the plot it's not all figured out, but the basic idea of it is there. And I mean, I think you can, I think Stephen King I read something about Stephen King saying, yeah, I just have a basic plot and then I just go in and start writing and see what turns up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, to have that confidence. Like I can't do that really. I'm too anal retentive. Like I definitely plot. But it's a fluid outline. Like I try to let it move as it wants to a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't slavishly adhere to an outline, but I do write one. And I do use it, but it tends to be fluid.
Yeah, I think I've heard versions of this from different authors on my podcast as well. Some of them are really, really plotters in a way that they write big, very detailed outline before even having a developmental edit done. By the way, so after you've done your own edits on your draft, what happens after? You have an editor that does...
Yeah, I send it to Kensington, and my editor there reads it and sends it back with suggestions. My agent also reads it. She doesn't make a lot of writing suggestions, but if she sees something she thinks needs addressing, she'll get back to me. Then after that, it goes to a copy editor at Kensington, and they go through it kind of with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it's, weird things, just weird stuff that you don't notice because, you write, how it is. You don't know. It's amazing what you can miss in your own, amazing is the wrong word. It's awful what you can miss in your own story. So they read it, they send it back to me, I make changes, and I think it goes through one more edit before. So it gets edited by my God, I swear to God, it goes through 7 or 8 versions. And then I always you can have Microsoft Word read your book to you. Like I'll take a finished manuscript and have Microsoft Word read it to me as I follow along. So I can catch typos and stuff, and you would not believe the stuff I catch. I mean, and this is after multiple edits still. So that's helped me a lot. It's kind of tedious listening to your own book, but it's very helpful. So everybody has their own process, I guess. Yeah. My outlines are not that detailed. I don't like to sit and go like, okay, I have no idea what's happening. That's why I do an outline. I have like a fear of the blank page, So I want to know what I'm intending to do with the chapter before I sit down with it. So I do enough of an outline so I'm not sitting there looking at the page going, I have no idea what happens next. I don't want that. Like I'm afraid of that. So I can't just go in it. I don't know how pantsers do it. Like I have a lot of admiration for people who are pantsers. I can't do that.
Yeah. I had some pantsers on my podcast as well, and it's incredible to me to hear about their process. It's also very different. Yeah. There is not this like two of the same kind of process for two pantsers, and I guess for two plotters the same. Like
no, yeah. I think it's different for every single person. And that's why I don't like writing rules like, well, if you're a writer, you have to do this, or you have to do that, or you should do that. There's a lot of stuff out there telling you what you have to do. Like you have to have this at this in this chapter, and you can't do this thing, and you have to do that thing. The truth is there's no really one right way to do it. You do what works for you. And don't worry about everybody says about it, right? It's like a very personal thing, writing. And so if it's working, if you're getting words on the page and it's turning into a book and you're happy and you're laughing as you read it, just do what works, right? Don't worry about the rules. That's just my opinion. Other people will tell you something else, but I don't like this idea that you have to adhere to a rule to be really doing it the right way. Because I don't believe there's a right way. There's what works for you. That's it. For me,
Yeah,
that's what I believe. Yeah.
that is an emergent theme, I think, in my
Yeah.
podcast at least. Everybody has a version of this saying that whenever someone tells you something strict and rigid, don't listen. That's not a good advice.
Hear what they're saying, but you can't make what works for one writer. You can't shove your writing into like a little box like that, right? Like, I mean, think of all the time you waste struggling to try to do what someone told you was the right way to do it when you could just be writing, you know? Just
Yeah.
words on the page. Whatever to get you there is the right way.
Well, I don't think I've ever asked an author that before, but I've never had authors with more than 20 books on my podcast yet.
Huh?
So after so many books, does it ever get harder to come up with new stories, characters?
I have a fear of writing the same characters more than once, and I really don't want to do that. And that does tend to happen because a lot of my female, like my heroines, talk like I do, which is not a bad thing, but talk a certain way. And so you don't want that for every book. So I try really, really hard not to make that happen. It is harder, sure. I don't have trouble coming up with ideas. There's so many things, like it's just, yeah, I don't have trouble coming up with ideas about what I want to write. But I do sometimes feel like I have to be very, very careful about making sure characters aren't getting like that this character isn't too similar to a character I did in another book. That I do worry about that some. Yeah. After 27 books, like how many characters are out there? Like the thing is there's a ton. It's an innumerable amount, but you still worry. I think all writers worry about that, you know?
Yeah, I think so. But also there are authors where readers know that they kind of write
Yes.
the same set of characters over and over and they just
Mm-hmm.
love it. It's
They
not
want
always,
it. No, I
yeah.
totally agree with you. Yep. That's one of the things about romance, because I don't know if that's true with other genres, but I do think, I think romance readers, they like their favorites for a reason. And so they're looking for a certain thing when they pick up your book. And so like you do want to give it to them, but not try to still make it as diverse as you can, which is quite a challenge, but yeah.
Yeah, and for yours, as I mentioned, it's like you have kind of different feel and different settings, and it
Yeah.
just just kind of the mood of each series is different.
Different, yeah. And you were mentioning that the Swooning Virgins, you were talking about how The Virgin Who Ruined Lord Grey was your first book of mine. That was a total departure from everything I had done before. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because I wanted to do something different. I was like, I don't want to do a series. I don't want to do another season. I think I had just done series. Yeah, I think the series before that was more season ballrooms. And it's like, I love that. I love writing it and I love reading it. But I wanted something totally different. And that's where the Swooning Virgins came from. Because those girls are bad at, like, they are out there running around the streets of London, knives strapped to their thighs. I mean, they're not the debutante heroines. So, and that was another series. I just love how that series turned out. And I had such a good time with it. I had such a good time writing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it showed in a book because
thank you. That's sweet.
I had an amazing
love to hear
time reading it.
It was a fun one.
I think I have a question about sort of the difference between the two series. Let's just take them as an example, but let me try to formulate it because it's like in my head, but I'm not sure how to express it. So I'm reading now a craft book called The Anatomy of Prose. Basically,
Mm.
it's how to craft sentences.
Oh,
And there is this author's note in the beginning saying that it's good to read about like concepts and to talk about concepts, but after all, when you're writing a book, it comes down to words, to like individual words on a page.
right.
And so, in regards to that, let's say we have the Swooning Virgins and we
Yep.
have what's the other series I've read? The Games Earl's Play, right? The
Right. Right.
mood between
Totally
them
different.
is completely different. One
Mm-hmm.
is light and almost fluffy, silly,
Mm-hmm.
funny, and the
Funny.
other one
Yeah. Kind of
is,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Darker.
other one is
Yeah.
angsty and kind of
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even gruesome in descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess my question would be, yeah, how basically go about choosing the words, the correct words to put to kind of
It's a
reflect
good
the
question.
style and the mood of the book.
It's hard to, it's such a good question, but it's hard to answer. I think, okay, so with the Swooning Virgins, people hated those titles, by the way, which in hindsight, maybe they weren't my finest. But the Swooning Virgins was a gothic romance. Like those were meant to be a takeoff on sort of the gothic in literature, which is sort of swooning virgins, headless corpses, haunted mansions, that kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
That's where swooning virgins came from, anyway. By the way, but and so when I was rewriting it, I looked at gothic. I've read a lot of gothic literature, but I went back and read like Anne Radcliffe, who's a really wonderful gothic romance writer from she wrote in the late 1700s. And you can go back and, I mean, honestly, the best way to do it is read a little bit of what other people have done, because like all writing is derivative, right? There's nothing totally new out there. And so you can take something and put your own spin on it, right? And try and make it your own. But a lot of people wrote really amazing gothic before I ever wrote Swooning Virgins, right? And so I went back and reread some stuff I had already read, and it's like it puts the words in your head a bit, I guess is what I would say. That vibe, you kind of absorb that vibe. Since English is your second language, that's harder. That's harder. I think it is harder sometimes to find the words. It's really challenging, and for everybody, but for an English as a second language speaker, it would be harder to find the words, I guess. I mean, I don't know because I haven't written in another language. But the best advice, I'm not really sure how to explain where I got those words. It just came out. But I'm sure it has to do with having read so much Gothic literature around the time I was writing that, because and it kind of becomes part of I don't know, you absorb it. And so it comes out when you're writing, not in a way that I don't necessarily understand, but it puts the right vibe in your head. And so when you start writing it, it comes out right, comes out in a
I
way that
think
works.
I think that would work for a lot of people, especially the ones whose English for whom English is not the second language. I think it
Yeah.
definitely would work. For me, I mean, I totally agree with your advice to read more. That is definitely the case. Like, I am a big fan of B.K. Borison and her
Oh,
Love Light series, and
oh,
I read the 3 books that came out very quickly, and I just kind of swallowed them. I don't even remember any words. It was amazing. But then I got the last one on ARC, and I was
uh-huh.
like, okay, let's make it an exercise and let's
Good for
read
you.
and see. Yeah, let's see what kind of words she's using to create this cozy, kind of very nice and sweet atmosphere. And yeah, honestly, I highlighted specific words that spoke to me
I love
that
this
she
so
used.
much. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that
I'm
was
sorry, I didn't mean to.
yeah. No, that's basically kind of works for me. I didn't know those words actually, but they just sounded nice and sweet, and
And it
especially
works.
the verbs. Yeah.
Yeah, the verbs. Yeah. I love that you just said that, because first of all, that is such a writery thing to do. Like to read a book, not just for the book, but for like read a book and go, how is this writer doing this? Like, I mean, I've done that so many times too. Like, read a book, love this book, read Glitterland, love it. How is he doing it? Like, going back and reading as a read, you can read as a reader and you can read as a writer, and going back and reading it as a writer so you can try and figure out, how are they doing this? Why do I like this book so much? Why does this work so well for me? Like reading it and just why could I not put this down? What are they doing? And that's such a reading with intention, I guess is what I would call it, or reading with purpose. Like you cannot replace skills you get from doing that. Like that might be one of the single most important things about being a writer is reading in a way where you learn something from the reading. The only problem is once you start doing that, it's hard to go back to, like reading for pleasure.
I
Like
was
I
just
still
about
read
to
for pleasure,
say,
but yeah, there's an element of that. Like sometimes I'll be reading and I'll be like, well, I'll like be rewriting a sentence in my head. Oh, this sentence would have sounded better if it was, and it's like, oh my God, no, I just want to I just want to enjoy the story. But in some ways, once you write, it's hard. Well, I can't totally separate writing from reading anymore, which is kind of sad. Like I want to read for pleasure.
yeah,
But I still do.
yeah,
I
I think
still
I
read
cannot do
everything
that
and love
anymore
it. So
either.
it changes things when you're writing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true. It does. But I think you're so smart to do that, and you're so on the right track when taking a look at writing in such an intentional way, and figuring out what they're doing. Figuring out what the writer is
Yeah,
doing.
I think it's a great advice to just read more and to read intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think for the people who really struggle with like finding words, in
Mm-hmm.
the same craft book, I have read a little exercise that might help. I didn't try it yet, but I think just taking a word from your book, from a plot, for example, an important word, and trying to create associations around it, like other words, but the
Mm-hmm.
ones that are supposed to reflect the mood. So, like if you think rain,
Right.
think about angsty
Clouds,
associations
shadows,
of
start. Right.
rain.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Yep.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
it's a small thing. I will try that. I'm writing a short story now, and I will need to tweak a lot of words because it's only 3,000 words, and
Mm-hmm.
I need to
Which
use
means
each
every one of
one
them counts. Yeah, exactly. To
exactly.
make the
So
most of them. Yep.
that's why I'm reading the book. I need to like get all the knowledge that I can so that I can submit the story in 2 weeks. So
Good for you. Oh, that's exciting.
I mean, it's something that I've never done, and I was like, okay, I'll try. Let's see.
I mean, that's how you do it, right? That's how you become a writer. You're like, oh, I've never done it, but I might as well just give it a try, right? You'd be amazed at what you can do.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just like close your eyes and click the button, just
Right.
like submit it.
Exactly.
Do
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
um, all right. I think I went off topic a little. I don't know if that's a stupid question, but so you mentioned something about POV. I don't even remember what, but it just prompted a question
Oh,
in my head.
POV.
Why
Yeah.
do you think none of the historical romances are written in the first POV?
I actually don't really know. I mean, because first person is all contemporary now is first person. I very rarely read a contemporary romance that isn't first person. It seems like historical is third. It's just this third person. It's like it makes you want to just write a historical in first. I mean, I've thought about it a bunch of times. I'm like, I should just write a historical romance in first, but I think I think my editor would flip out and my agent. Like, it just isn't, it's not the trend or it's not the way. I don't, I wish I knew. I wish I could answer that question, but I don't really know how these rules start. I will say this, though, in terms of point of view. Okay, people are going to burn me at stake for this too, but I feel for me anyway, again, won't apply this to anybody else. For me, a really good, deep third person point of view, I don't think you get anything from writing first that you can't get from really deep third. So I'm okay with third person point of view. It's comfortable for me. I've been doing it, but also because I don't know that I'm necessarily losing anything writing in third instead of first. Now, I will say, if you have a really, really, really voicey character, like a character that has a really, really distinctive voice. Like, I don't know, have you read Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead? That's a perfect example of something in first person where the character is incredibly engaging and their voice is very specific. If you have that, then I can see the advantages of first. But if it's hard to get that. So yeah, I mean, hey, maybe you should write a historical romance in
Oh.
first. I wish somebody would do it. I'm too chicken, but it'd be great if somebody did.
Well, we don't know. Maybe it exists already, but I've never seen it
Maybe.
before.
Yeah.
Who knows? The thing is, I used to think that maybe it's because it's hard to kind of imagine yourself in the place of the heroine or the hero in that time. But
That's
then I
a
think
good point.
there is fantasy romance, and like they are in first
Mm,
person a lot, and like this is a
yeah,
completely
true.
different magical world. So I don't know. I don't really
I
know as
don't
well what's
either.
the
I don't
reason.
know. But I guess nothing's off limits, right? Like if you say you sit down or I sit down or somebody sits down to write historical romance and they're like, I'm doing it in first. I don't care what anybody says. If it works, nobody's gonna mind, right? Like if you do it and it works, then more power to you, you know?
Yeah, and I find it actually I do love third really much. Like I enjoy
Yeah.
reading
Yeah.
third, and sometimes I read a sentence and I'm like in first person it wouldn't have worked as well. It would have been
No.
different,
It
and
would have to be a
yeah,
different sentence. Yeah. It's
yeah,
such a
and
huge difference. Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
sometimes
know.
enjoy it way more. And the short story is written in the third person, and I really really enjoyed doing that. It was so much fun.
Have you read any one of the books one of the recommendations I'm going to give you is Deep Third, How to Write in Deep Third Person Point of View. My God, I swear to God that's the hardest thing I've ever done. Like I've read so many books about it and trying to really get deep into third is so hard. I never know if I'm ever doing it right. I think that's been my biggest challenge over the last 5 years is to really write in deep third point of view because it's very difficult to be so in the character's head that none of your own ideas leak through. So I find that to be a really great exercise to really go as deep in third as you can get. I don't think I've ever gotten as deep as I want to on that. So I keep working on it and keep working on it, keep working on it.
You would consider your books to be in deep third, but maybe to a degree.
Right. There I wish they were in deep, deep third. I don't know that they're necessarily there yet. I think if you read, and this is true of a lot of writers, if you read like the first books I've written and then compare them to like some of the, like say the Dukes, the Drop Dead Dukes that just came out, there's intention to make those in third, deep third. I didn't even know about deep third until I'd written like 7 books or something. I mean, I knew about it, but I wasn't trying to do it. Then I read about it. And it's funny. One of the reasons I started trying was because I was reading these books is this exact same thing we were talking about where I'm reading. I'm like, how is this writer doing this? How are they doing it? And then it's like, wait a minute. The reason I'm so engaged with the characters is because I'm actually in their head, you know? And so that's deep third, right? When you're in the character's head. And then I started trying to do it, and it really challenging. At least for me, it's been challenging. But I think you can tell the difference between deep third, these later books I've written, and the first ones, where I'm closer to deep third. I'm not sure I'm actually. There's people who do it better than I do. A lot of people out there that are a lot better. But it's heading in that direction. I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but it's like deep third is always kind of on my mind.
No,
It's
but
nothing like being in a character's head, like
no, but
in their head. Yeah.
it's a great tangent because I'm honestly very interested in that as well. And
Yeah.
I'm just puzzled. How do you even know like how far you are removed? What are like the signs that you may say that this is deep
Oh
third or
gosh.
not deep third?
I will. Okay. So this is not my idea. I got it from one of my craft books. Is that they say go in and look and see how much times you're saying she wondered, she expected, because when you're in deep third, you don't have to say that because you're just hearing the character wonder about something. Do you know what I mean? Like look for verbs where you're explaining what they're doing because that's outside of them. Like when you wonder about something, like say you're walking down the street and you see something, you're like, I wonder if that is a bluebird. You're in your head, you don't go, I wonder if that's a bluebird. You go, is that a bluebird? Like, you don't need that verb in there is I guess what I'm saying. And so the best advice I got to find it is to look and see if you're doing it is doing deep third correctly is to look and see how many of those verbs are in there that separate the reader, the character from the reader, right? So the idea is there's as little separation as possible between the character and the reader. So the reader kind of in a sense becomes the character. And I thought, oh, when I first read about it, I'm like, oh, how hard could it be? Hard, so hard. I was like, oh, the hubris of writers. We all think we could do it like that. Book after book after book. And I still see, why is this verb here? Like I still see it and I still can't quite get where I want to get. I still haven't gotten where I want to get with it. But I'm always pressing in that direction. Read, look up deep third, who writes in deep third, and read their books. That's basically what I did. Who's a good deep point of view, deep third point of view writer? Give me examples. And I started reading the books that came up on the list, and I was like, okay, here we go with Joe Abercrombie and not necessarily romance either. Celeste Ng writes in deep third. In my opinion, I think her books are in deep third. She's a great writer, and so I read a bunch of her books, and I'm like, yeah, I can see how you're doing it. I just haven't been able to figure out how to quite get all the way in there that I want to do.
Yeah, I think also the craft book that I have there, the show don't tell and understanding show don't tell and
Yeah,
really getting it. So it
right.
is not about the third POV, but it is
Same
kind of
idea. Yeah,
kind of same idea of going as close to the character as you
right,
can. So removing all the filler words and stuff like that. That was
right.
also very useful.
I remember reading one time a writer who said they'd write, 100,000. This was an experienced writer, and this was when I had just started. And she's a romance writer, and she said, I write a whole book and I never say he said or she said in the entire book, where it's 100,000 words, because you never. Now sometimes you have to do that, but this person said their goal was to never write. Never use dialogue tags, right? Like he said, she said after a sentence in an entire book, and I'm like, what? I remember thinking, how? But if you go through, I've eliminated a lot of that in my books too. You'll see a few, but there's not a lot of he said, she said, because the whole idea is to get it so everybody knows who's speaking just by the structure of the writing and also by the character's voice, right? So, and also with romance, you switch back and forth between, most people do, between hero and heroine. And so that structure is already there. So it's not that hard to tell the difference, but just never using the dialogue tags. I'm like, my God, that's hard.
That sounds a bit extreme, but interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been able to do it, but
I
not
mean,
totally.
it's not like you have to do it, but like
You
just to
don't.
have it maybe as some sort of challenge for yourself and see
Right.
how you can make the character voice so good that you won't need the
So
tags.
authentic that you won't need it. And I think, basically, I think what we're getting to is that, like, I always am trying to do something different. Like, I remember one of your questions was what to you is being a successful writer. And I'm like, well, I think all writers want some of those signs of external success. Like, you want to make a list, like a USA Today bestseller list, or you want to sell a certain number of books, or you want to make a certain amount of money. And that's fine. It's a business, right? Like, it's fine. I have those same markers of success. But on a deeper level, there's also the always learning something, always trying something new. There's always something to learn about writing. It's one of the best things. Like, I've never yet read a craft book where I'm like, oh, I already knew all this stuff. No, that never happens. Well, I never thought about that. Oh, I never thought about that. I never tried that. That to me is being successful, where you're like always striving to make it better, to make it a better reading experience. Sometimes successfully and sometimes not, I guess. But yeah,
All right. I didn't ask you about your teaching experience since you
right.
said that you've been teaching writing.
I did.
So like you've been teaching complete newbies, right? People who haven't been writing before.
I taught like freshmen in college. I mean, it wasn't creative writing necessarily. Most of the writing, I don't have a PhD, so I couldn't teach, upper level writing classes. And so I was doing like, English 101, teaching students how to write college essays, like kind of the like more boring stuff, which I mean, I can't complain, even though I got really burnt out on it, because there's no way you can to teach for that long and read that much writing and talk about how to write and think about writing without becoming a better writer. Like, all those years I spent teaching taught me a ton about writing. So yeah, I taught like introductory college writing courses. Nothing glamorous about that. I did teach a Shakespeare class. I taught a writing and film class. I did do some other kind of more interesting things over the years. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same stuff over and over again when you're teaching at that level, which isn't the most interesting. So we get back to the reason why I wanted to start writing again, because I was like, I'm not getting what I need out of this anymore. I need to do something else. I can do this, but I also have to do something else.
Yeah,
Hence
yeah,
the
that
book. Yeah.
definitely that
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. Um, since you're reading a lot, who are your author
My
mentors,
faves.
favorites?
Mentors, definitely. Well, Alexis
Not
Hall,
really
right?
mentor. I think what
But
was the word that was in the document?
inspiration.
Heroes, I
Me
meant.
here.
Yeah,
Oh,
sort
okay.
of.
I
Yes.
have so many, and some of them are friends of mine. Like I love Minerva Spencer's writing, and I love Minerva Spencer. She's the best. I love
Oh,
Kerrigan Burns' writing. I love that dark,
oh my
some of
God.
those dark, really like that right in the pit of your stomach writing. I read a ton as well. Like I mentioned, Celestine. I don't just read romance. I'm about to read Anne Patchett's Tom Lake. I haven't started it yet. But I'm really excited. Gosh, so many. There's so many. I think I first started being really interested in doing romance when I was reading writers like Elizabeth Hoyt, who is I think her books are fantastic. She's so great. Like her books are so good. Lisa Kleypas, the same historical romance writers that you hear a lot about, they were like writing probably 10, 15 years before my first book came out. Lorraine Heath, who I also really like as a person. She does a lot of charity stuff for literacy. Buns and Roses is coming up in October in Dallas, and I'll be there. And I think there's like 21 writers going to it. So Buns and Roses is a big it's a charity for literacy. Like all the proceeds go to a literacy program. And I've done it like twice before, and it's really fun. I don't see I'm getting off on a tangent again, but so I really like Lorraine's writing, Loretta Chase. Gosh, there's so many. I'm going to forget people. But those were the ones I was reading. Oh, Julianne Long was another huge one for me. Those were the writers I was reading when I first started writing. Like when I first really sat down and said, okay, I'm doing this. Like I'm going to write this historical romance. Had been reading all their books, and getting such joy out of them that I think I would call them my inspirations. Some of those historical romance writers. There's more too. I'm forgetting people, but
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. It's always
there's
like
so many.
there's so many, really. I have like a full shelf here, and that's maybe
Yeah.
5% of all the books that I want to have.
Oh, I know, right? It's a disease that it's all the books. I have so many books too, and it's like,
And yeah, I have Kleypas, and I have Tessa Dare,
love
and
her.
I have a lot of and I have Kerrigan Byrne that I've only read one, but I have like 5 others on my shelves that I still need to get to. There's
Those
so
won't
much to
disappoint.
discover.
Oh, but you're right. There's so much, and so you're always kind of shuffling around. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
there's some
that's
great
true.
writers out there. Yeah.
Well, and I promised you that I will come back to the imposter syndrome question. So,
Oh gosh.
does it still happen? It's been 9 years. You must be thinking you're a very good
It
writer by
does.
now.
Oh, I don't know. It still happens. It absolutely happens. Okay, so I was posting on my Instagram that I went to go to the Ripped Bodice I think I was interacting with you. Posted on my
Yeah.
Instagram because I finally got to the Ripped Bodice down in LA because I was in LA doing college tours with my son. And I was like, my God, when I go into the Ripped Bodice, should I tell them, that I write? That I write historical women? Like they're not gonna have heard of me, And I was just like, I was nervous. Like I didn't want to go in and say who I was because I was like, well, if I go in and say who I am, it's like I'm expecting them to know who I am. And it was this whole thing. Like I had all this anxiety about going into the Ripped Bodice, right? Who cares if they know who you are, right? And so that's a perfect example of imposter syndrome. Like, 27 books later, but I tend in that direction. I'm sure there's other writers who are suffer from it a lot less, but I do still have it. Yeah. Not all the time, but I wish I could say, oh, it totally goes away, but human nature,
Yeah,
right? Human nature
exactly.
to always think, to always sort of put yourself in this position where you're, I guess, not as confident. Like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but I think it's human nature in some ways to have imposter syndrome. And
Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah.
true. And so, since we started just talking about books in the shops, does your publisher do all the promoting part and like distribution to the bookstores and stuff like that, just so people know for traditionally published books?
They do. So if you're traditionally, yeah, you turn it over to them. They do the covers. They do the publicity. They do all the distribution. You don't have to do any of that. Well, no, I take that back. You don't have to do any of the distribution, and you don't have to worry about the cover. Publicity is a whole other thing. Even in traditional publishing, you have to promo. I mean, they won't do it all for you, especially if you're new. They'll do it all for you if you make them a lot of money, right? Like, so there's definitely certain books that get more publishing revenue than others. And so almost every writer does some of it on their own. And I think, that was maybe when we started to see more writers going indie, because I think people rightly thought, well, I mean, I have to do everything. I have to publish it myself. Like I have to publicize it myself. I have to write it, publicize it. How hard is it to get a cover, an editor, and learn how to advertise it, And rightly so, because traditional publishing doesn't do as much for writers as they used to. And so it's not like you're off the hook if you're traditionally published. You still have to do it. You still have to do publicity. You're still supposed to be on all your social medias. You're still supposed to be at book signings. You're still supposed to be doing all that stuff, right? And so, in some ways, indie, I get it, because you have control over your own pricing when you're indie. You have a lot more control over your books when you're indie. Obviously, you hold the copyright still. So yeah, makes perfect sense to me why people are going indie. And I think in some ways I'm missing the boat by not trying it, not doing something like that. It's hard to do indie once you're traditional, because I can't just go write a book and not turn it over to my publisher. I'm not allowed to. So if for people, I think the grass is always greener to an extent, but for people who are trying who think that the big success is to be a traditionally published author, don't think that's the truth anymore. I think that maybe used to be true, that to have arrived was to be a traditionally published author, and now I don't think it anymore, right? I think people who are indie are really savvy about advertising and publicity, and I think it's really smart to know how to do that for yourself, right? Aside from whether you're traditionally or indie published. That's kind of a
Yeah,
mix
yeah,
of a lot of things, but
yeah. I think luck is kind of involved in both sides. So
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
you never know. A lot of indie published authors also don't see much success or much money, but
I
then
know.
at some point someone gets viral and here you go, now
Hmm.
you have a career. So there's
Yeah.
luck in traditional and then there's luck in
Totally
indie as
true.
well.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're one of those people who's out there querying and you're not getting any bites, or you can't get an agent, or you're having trouble getting an agent, or there is no reason for you to have those things. You can go you can do it yourself, right? If you want your book out there, like, absolutely don't for traditional publishing, because there's drawbacks to traditional as well. So all the traditional people are all like, maybe I should go indie. So there's no one right way to do it.
Yeah. And you did mention that you cannot actually write a book and not give it to a publisher, publish it yourself.
No,
So that's your contract, right? You cannot
right.
do that.
You can't write a historical romance that they don't get first. Now, if they turned it down, if they said, "Oh, I don't want it," then it could get more interesting. But that doesn't happen. That never happens, because by the time and I don't mean that as a brag, I mean it, by the time we've contracted for it, they already know basically what the whole series is going to be about. And so there's not a lot of surprises. So unless I basically just don't turn a book in, or I repeat the same word 27, like for 380 pages, like, they know what they're going to get when they sign me for a contract. And so generally it doesn't happen. I don't think for most traditionally published writers that their publisher turns down a book they were contracted to write. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, no, like, there's a lot of stipulations on what I can and can't do.
But you did say historical. So if you write a contemporary, for example.
Well, even then, I'm legally, no. Legally, I think
Okay.
I could write a contemporary. Bradley's a pen name. I could use my real name, and that there's no stipulations on that. But I already have this platform, right? So I do sometimes think about breaking out, though, and just writing a contemporary, or writing something else, writing a mystery, totally different. Just because that's how you grow as a writer, you keep doing something different. So part of me does want to break out, do something else. Not give up historical romance. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
No,
do
no, no.
both. Do something as well as that.
So that would be your advice for improving your craft, just like trying new things
Yeah.
and learning.
And you can do that within your genre. Like, try doing deep point of view, or try changing from third to first, or try writing something like, maybe you write really funny, fluffy rom-coms. Try writing something that isn't fluffy and rom-com. There's so many ways to do it. There's so many different ways to do things. So, just to keep it fresh, to try something different.
At the end, I usually ask about the best and the worst writing advice. We have kind of touched on these things already. If you
Right.
have any other advice that you would like to tell my listeners.
I have one little thing that's always bugged me. I don't like it when they say write what you know, right? Because it takes something that's far more complicated and puts it into this one little sentence, and then people are like, but what do I know? Like, people get freaked out by it. Like, well, what do I know about being an earl in the 18th century? Not a thing. It doesn't mean, I think, take that advice with a grain of salt. think it's what it's always meant to me is that who you are will come out in your books, right? Like that is like your voice will end up in there somewhere. The things you believe, the values you have will end up in your book. So I guess in that way, we all write what we know, or we all write what we believe. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But it doesn't mean you can only write things you've experienced. I don't believe that's true, right? So, or you can only write it if you know all about it, or, it's very limiting to say, write what you know. So I've never liked it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, to me, at this point, since it's still like beginning stages for me, it's kind of comforting because there are some things I know and I could
Sure.
write about them. But yeah, at some point, I think it will definitely become limiting where I would think that I cannot branch out into this new thing just because I know
Right.
nothing about that.
Yeah, I get any piece of writing advice, take what works for you out of it and then just discard the rest is basically what I'm saying. Best advice, read everything. Read. That's the best piece of writing advice I can give is read widely and often.
Yeah, I know authors who say that it's hard to read in your genre, or it's just hard in generally to find time to read when you're writing a lot.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I do understand the writing. I don't tend to read in my genre when I'm really deep into a book because, you don't absorb somebody else's idea without realizing it. So I just don't read historical romance at all when I'm deep in a book. Now, in between books, I might read historical romance and, something, but I still read a lot, even with writing. My kids are older now, so I have more time to still read.
yeah, that's time is a lot, is a big factor.
It's a huge factor.
Okay. Well, my second to last question would be about recommendations, but I think we've covered that.
I'm going to send you more of a list, but yeah, there's a lot of great craft books out there.
Okay. In that case, let's talk about your latest book or the book that's coming out soon.
Yeah, it's coming out September 23rd. It's called The Duke's Christmas Bride. It's the third book in the Drop Dead Duke's third and final, and it's a Christmas book. And
A
it's one
full
of
one?
those books. Yeah, it's full. Yeah, actually, it's the only full-length Christmas book I've ever written. Usually it's been a novella, which originally intimidated me. I was like, how am I gonna? Anyway, it worked out though. Actually, that ended up being one of those books that it all fell together really easily. Every once in a while you get one of those books where you're like, wow, it's all working. I don't know why. Like, I wish it was this way every time. That book was one of those. And I really love the way it turned out. So I hope readers like it. It's up on NetGalley now, actually. If you guys are on NetGalley, if anybody's on NetGalley, you can get the Duke's request it. And if you request it and you can't get it, email me and I'll see if I can get it for you. I do that a lot. So,
well, then let's remind the listeners about your website, email, any social handles.
Yeah, website is www.annabradley.net. No, wait, is it .net or .com? You'd think I know this stuff, but I hardly ever go to my own website.
I will tell
No, it's
you.
.com. It's .com. And I'm on Insta. I think it's Anna Bradley 2. I am not great with the social media. I do not get on there very often.
Well, I'm good with social media, let me tell you.
You're really good with that. I don't know how you do it.
Not really.
You are. You're good.
It's Anna Bradley author without
Anna Bradley author.
Any punctuation. Yeah. Anna Bradley author.
And that's also on Threads. It's Anna Bradley author. And I just got on Threads like a couple of weeks ago because I just finally deactivated Twitter. I couldn't take it anymore. And so I'm off Twitter and on Threads. And I'm on Facebook as well. And Facebook, I have a lot more followers on Facebook than any of my other social media, which means I should be doing a lot more work there, but I don't get on there because I don't love Facebook either. That's Anna Bradley author. So you can find me on all my social media handles are on my website as well. So
and I'll put everything in the show notes so that people can find you. Well, thank you so much. I don't know about my listeners, but I have learned a ton.
Well, I hope it was informative. Yeah, I tend to ramble, so you'll have to cut me off at some point in the edits.
No, I think it was amazing. I've learned a lot. I think everything we talked about is quite useful, not even for only the historical romance writers, but just like in general and about the traditional publishing as well. There's a lot of useful information. So thanks a lot. It was so nice to speak with you and
you too.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you hear so far, please consider subscribing and tune in for the next episode. If you have burning questions about writing you'd like to have answered, head to my Instagram page at kkalbabooks and leave me a message. Or use my email k.k.alba.books@gmail.com. If you'd like your favorite author to answer your question on my show, again, head to my Instagram or email me to let me know which author you'd like me to invite, and I'll try to get over my anxiety and do it. On the other hand, if you're an author who's published at least one book, traditional or indie, and you'd like to become a guest, well, you know what to do by now. Message me and let's get to know each other.